it later became clear that Jill had in fact been shot and not stabbed, and a quarter of a century later, her murder remains unsolved. And Jennie's here with us now. Hi, Jennie. Gosh, just watching that, having, you know, sort of sat in that newsreader seat, how did you separate Jennie newsreader and Jennie friend?
Well, I mean, you're okay. You just do, don't you? You get on with your job. But it was probably the toughest bulletin I'd ever had to do. You know, just a couple of years earlier, I'd reported extensively on the death of Diana, who I also knew and liked. But this was far more personal, far more shocking. I mean, the whole newsroom was in shock. And newsroom is such a vibrant place, you know. Yeah. You know, it's buzzy and everyone's chatting at the same time. And that morning, suddenly it all went quiet and honestly, physically cold, it seemed.
What was the timing of the morning? I mean, when did you first hear?
It was about midday that we started hearing rumours. Well, we heard that someone had been killed on their doorstep, a woman. And then, unbelievably, people started saying, it's Jill. And we were just whispering. We didn't dare say it out loud. Yeah. We didn't believe it. And we, at the BBC, were absolutely adamant that we had to contact the family first. And so I don't think we were the first to break the news, actually, but that didn't matter. The family were told. And my bosses came over to me and said, are you OK, can you do this? And I said yes. But I mean, you could see I was very emotional, but you could also see, and you'd know this if you've read the news, that when you're dreading saying something, you probably say that bit perfectly well, and then you have a little stumble after that, and I did. And that just betrayed how
you also looked
a
bit in shock. And sometimes shock protects you from emotion, doesn't it, initially? Because it took a long time for the news to sink in, I think. You know, when you're told something, it still feels quite surreal, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it was, you know, it was a fast-moving story at that stage, and we got it wrong. I mean, she wasn't stabbed, but it was something that stayed with the whole of the newsroom for days after that, and I think we all felt a little bit frightened, actually. You know, and then nights after that, when I got home to my house at 11 o'clock at night, maybe after a day in the newsroom, and put the key in the door, you just sort of looked around. Am I safe? Am I OK? Because we didn't know then who killed her, and we don't know now, 25 years later.
And it's difficult.
Oh, sorry,
just because it's difficult to kind of get across, because we've got a younger generation. I mean, Frankie, you probably don't have the memory that the rest of us have. How utterly unfathomable it was. I mean, Jill was the golden girl of television, absolutely known as this bright, bubbly, sunny character who presented the holiday programme and the news and all these things, and you know, was loved, absolutely loved. That she should be shot on her doorstep was, I mean, it's difficult to express.
Yeah, it was like the girl next door had suddenly been assassinated, and that's what it looked like, an assassination.
Yeah, what were the early conversations with that then? What were people thinking at that
Well,
point?
I think most people thought at the beginning it was probably an oddball, and yet it had some of the signs, it seemed to us, of an assassination.
Yeah.
A muffler,
I remember that's what I thought, because it was because she was shot in the head. Yeah.
And now this week, you know, there have been revelations. I don't know, but a new lead anyway has come forward, which I hope will be investigated. That possibly a man who's now serving a 40-year jail term in Serbia, and who is convicted of assassinating the former Serbian president and prime minister, bears a striking resemblance to a man that one witness saw running away from Jill's home.
But the lead police guy of Hamish Campbell, he did a piece, didn't he? And he sort of ruled that out. Well, he does. I mean, what can any of us rule out 25 years on? Yeah. But he doesn't think it had the hallmarks of a professional hit. And the main reason for that was that she was not due to be at her house on Gowan Avenue on that day. Yeah. She just happened to pop back. And so his theory has always been that it was an obsessive person that was sort of waiting behind her hedge and just kind of happened to be there when she came home unexpectedly.
Yeah, it may well be, but I just think we owe it to Jill. Jill, who was integral to solving so many crimes because of her role on Crime Watch. We owe it to her to explore every avenue just to see, you know...
We were saying earlier, I don't think I even knew the word stalker in those days. It like you say, it was just so
A more
unfathomable.
innocent time, I
It really was.
Oh, I don't know. Well, you
don't
will
think
all
so?
ladies know that if you get a little bit of fame, you get all sorts of oddballs writing to you, and people.
And she'd had a few.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I did too. And people, there was a child murderer who wrote to me almost every week from prison. There were people who wrote and said, "I'm going to wait for you outside the BBC," you know. And I thought, well, please don't, you know.
Yeah.
What sort of friendship did you have?
Oh, she was lovely, Jill. You know, she was the most generous woman because we women can be... bitches is not the right word, is it? But we can be a little bit
Sometimes
jealous.
be tough on each other.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it. But she was never that.
Yeah.
I mean, she was such a star that when we were in a makeup room together or something, she always used to say, and I think of her all the time when I'm doing my hair, because she used to say, your hair looks a bit blocky, which it does, look, it's a bit blocky. She said, use some of this wax, and she put wax through my hair. And I said, oh, that's nice. So every time I use a little bit of wax, I think of Jill. So I think of Jill every... And she was just lovely like that. And
She was. There was not the old phrase, there's not a bad bone in her body. And from my perspective over at the time on the print media, there was such an appetite to get this story in the papers and to help find the killer because she had always been so lovely to other journalists because she was a journalist herself and it felt like she was one of us. But she'd always played the game, as we say. You know, she'd never sort of said, oh, you pesky people annoying me. You know, she was always very polite, very, you know, just a lovely, lovely person, which is, again, what made it so kind of like, who would want to kill Jill Dando? Yeah. It just did not make any sense at all.
It's funny, the memory I have of her, she and I at one point kind of shared a job, if you like. It was actually Esther Ranson who was unwell, and so we shared, sort of standing in for Esther, and so we shared an office, but we didn't actually cross paths. And because I'm a terrible snoop, I would look at all the cards that were on the desk, and there was these lovely cards from Jill Dando, who I was in awe of. I mean, she really was the most... But she'd written these really, really lovely cards, and you got a real sense of her, and it made me think, God, I'm a real horror, because I don't do these things. But even just through her writing, you know, I just kind of thought, well, she is what she appears to be on television, because they were just so genuine.
So why would anyone want to do anything like that?
And she was standing at her wedding as well later that year. It was just, you know, and 37, I'd forgotten. It's so young, isn't it?
Yeah. So how do you remember then, Jenny?
I remember her as an absolutely charming, good friend, someone who wanted to help others in the industry, a very generous character, and just so sad. I mean, so terribly sad to be cut down at that age.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you very much. Thank you very much for coming and speaking about Jill, and it's lovely that that is the memory that we're left with. As you say, such a tragic loss.